Hello, and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 32, Tuesday, December 10th, 2019.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back. Today I am your ghost host, Courtney, and I am joined as always by my grim-grinning co-host, Emily.
Hey, Courtney, I am so glad we have come out to socialize for our last episode of 2019.
There is always room for one more, so we're excited to have a special guest on today's episode. Today we're joined by Jeff Baham, author of the unauthorized story of Walt Disney's Haunted Mansion, now in its second edition, celebrating the iconic attraction's 50th anniversary. Jeff is the founder of the Haunted Mansion fan site doombuggies.com, and you can also hear him on the Mousetalgia and Doombuggy Spook Show podcasts. We're grateful to have him on ours today. Welcome, Jeff.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
So, Jeff, we're really excited to have you. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. We may have some people who are not familiar with Mousetalgia and Doombuggies, your show and your website. So tell us about you.
Sure. Well, let's see. That's a good question. I'm a high school teacher in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. I have been part of the Disney, online community for it seems like it has been decades, actually. Doombuggies, my website about the Haunted Mansion, just celebrated its 22nd anniversary, I guess.
Congrats.
Well, thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, it's I have been doing that for forever and researching the Haunted Mansion. Spoiler alert about the background of the book, but and so I'm just kind of always been a Disney fan, Imagineering fan, and behind the scenes kind of a fan of Disney stuff, and as long as I can remember. So I just decided one day, I was going to kind of learn about the internet. When I went to college to be an art, I'm actually a graphic designer by trade, and I now teach graphic design in high school. But when I went to college to get my art degree, I'm just old enough that I didn't have to learn a single thing about computers at all. So I graduated, but I realized websites were becoming, a thing that I would really need to know how to do. So I thought I would teach myself, HTML, and that's how I started Doombuggies. Halfway as a passion project, but also halfway as a realistic way to actually learn how to be, design websites. And so, that's 22 years ago, and here we are.
I probably found my way to it maybe like 2002 or 2003. It's actually one of my earliest internet memories. So it was like poking around. I really liked Disney, kind of made my way to Snopes like back in the day, reading all the Disney pieces on there. And I know that Doombuggies definitely came across my browser.
Wow. Yeah, it's been a while.
With your background, Jeff, I'm also a high school teacher. I love that we keep meeting teachers on this podcast. But I'm realizing, Courtney, I'm slacking. He can have you're successfully putting together 2 websites, 2 podcasts. You wrote a book. I need to expand my Disney fan horizons here.
Well, the big picture is I do my work and I have my occupation. And then I'm a Disney fan. That's my hobby.
Yeah.
So I kind of split that up into however I can and use my gifts and talents the best I can. And they turn out to be producing information, I guess. So the podcast, Mousetalgia, is probably the thing that I focus on the most. It takes the most time, because as you know, podcasting is something that takes a bit of effort. And so we started that about 11 years ago. So it's almost halfway between Doombuggies and Mousetalgia to now. And every week I and my co-host get together. And, I started Mousetalgia a decade ago, I thought it was going to be a blog. I thought, I thought I came up with the name Nostalgia by myself, and I was all impressed. And then I started Googling it, and I found one article. I don't know if it was in the New York Times, some newspaper once, 20 years ago, used in the headline. Someone was talking about a Mickey Mouse collector's collection, and he called it Nostalgia. And I thought, shoot.
No.
But it's okay. I mean, we still stuck with it. And, yeah, I mean, we just try to bring the West Coast. So there were when we started Nostalgia, there were a ton of Walt Disney World and East Coast focused podcasts at the time, but there were really not many Disneyland focused things. Not really any, a couple maybe. So we decided to jump into the world that we knew, which is West Coast Disney stuff, and we try to kind of be a combination of Disney fan stuff and Disney lifestyle and a travel help for Disneyland fans and people going to Disneyland. And then we sneak history in there as much as we can to try to give people like a big, wide view of why we personally have, our Disney fandoms and what that is all about. And so, yeah, we've been doing that for 10 years. And so, it takes a lot of time to write books and do websites and stuff. In fact, Doombuggy sat around for about 6 years with nothing happening at all. I mean, people were still coming and saying, hey, this Flash doesn't really work on my browser. So finally, and so finally a year ago, I said, it's going to be the 50th anniversary of the Haunted Mansion next year. I got to focus on this. So it took me about 6-8 months maybe I rewrote the whole website and recreated everything. So it's really, at the moment, it's really a brand spanking new website. Just been up a couple months. So yeah, still trying to go strong. I mean, the kind of websites that people just go to just look at stuff are kind of old. I don't know, but it's it's like a library or a repository of information, right? And even if it's just for me, it's going to be there. It's not as interactive as some things, although we have lots of social media, places, but it's not really a website designed to be active, and it's more of a place that you can just come and learn, right? And so that's what Doombuggies will always be.
And it seems like Doombuggies was definitely the big inspiration behind your book, but I'd love to know why the Haunted Mansion, not another attraction. Like, what drew you to that?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I think it's because I am just a monster kid. I was born in the late 60s, and so I was still in the heyday of cheesy monster movies, right? And so I used to buy Famous Monsters magazine with my allowance. I remember all those great Warren magazines and things, and I just have always been drawn to, not to scary stuff. I don't really like being scared or startled, but I love the atmosphere of Halloween and classic monster movies, and I've always been drawn to that. The Haunted Mansion kind of fits into that kind of perfectly. And aside from that, my parents always, for some reason, they always kept a copy of the Chilling Thrilling Sounds of the Haunted House in our home. We always had a copy of that, and the Haunted Mansion. And I think it was I probably asked for it when I was a little kid. They wouldn't really buy us disco records or that kind of stuff, but they'd buy any Disney record we wanted. So I'd always say, I want the Haunted Mansion. And I broke it. I remember having pieces of the Haunted Mansion record in my hands numbers of times. So I'm sure they would keep replacing it. I was a kid that would trace pictures in everything we had. All our books had little, indents from tracing, and I'm sure that's how I broke a number of the Haunted Mansion records too. So, but I was always surrounded by the Haunted Mansion, and that plus the fact that I loved Halloween and spooky things, and I also used to make haunted houses when I was in college. With a friend, we had a couple strip mall haunted houses, and
very cool.
It kind of, the whole thing together. It was kind of a natural fit.
I had a similar relationship with the official album of Epcot Center cassette tape as a child. I was very drawn to that.
Wow. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I didn't have. So, like I said before, I'm not an East Coast guy. I don't really even hardly know anything about Walt Disney World. I'm almost proud of my ignorance about Walt Disney World. I know up to the point of where Walt Disney had planned the experimental prototype City of Tomorrow, but then I kind of stop listening. So maybe someday you can tell me all about Epcot.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
And see, from your book, we learned so much about Disneyland's Haunted Mansion because we're East Coasters. Our home park is Florida, Orlando. That, like, for me, I have also never been to Disneyland. Courtney has a couple times. So I feel like we're the opposite, where like my Disneyland history ends at like 1964 with the World's Fair, and then like some new attractions pop up, and after that I'm like, I don't know what's happened since then. So we learned a lot from your book, but how did you find all that learning? Tell us about that, your research to go into writing your book.
Yeah. Well, there's a few different parts to that. One is that I've worked for a newspaper my entire working career. So I think this is my 35th, or I don't know how many years I've been with this. It's a family in the Silicon Valley. There's a family that owns a number of newspapers, and they're not big daily papers, but they're community papers, but they've always hired like retired reporters and, that kind of people to write about the community. So I've always been surrounded by people that know how to find details that people want to know about. So I kind of had kind of on the job, I guess, unintended training about how to be a reporter or a researcher. Do you know what I mean by that? And so so I kind of, that's part of it. Part of it is just, I was very lucky. And here's another spoiler alert. I just started a new book, so that'll come into the conversation later. But when I started writing the Haunted Mansion book, it was already researched because of about, at the time, 15 years of hosting doombuggies. And so, I had a slow pace. I had just been able to, over a decade, research the Haunted Mansion. So, any author would, love to have a decade to just, in 10 years, I'm going to write a book, but for this 10 years, I'll just sit here and gather information, right? Because I didn't really know I would ever put it into a book form. I just thought this is going to be the library of everything Haunted Mansion that I can ever discover or dream up. And since Doombuggies came out when the internet was fairly young, it was easy for Disney fans to find. So a lot of Imagineers and cast members and people that love the Haunted Mansion would easily find it. And then they'd send me their stories and their pictures and their information and their memories and their thoughts. And so I could kind of gather from a lot of oral history also, or just memories from people that had been somewhat involved or at least big fans of the Haunted Mansion. So that all came into play. I didn't really get to, let's see. I feel like I was kind of a passive researcher. I didn't do a lot of aggressive, like, I'm going to go out there and find something new research until somewhat, well, I guess not recently now, but, maybe 10 years ago is when I really started. With Nostalgia is when I really started becoming a active researcher. So I wasn't just letting people come to me and tell me this and that. So for many years, it was mostly just whatever I could discover in periodicals and people that just offered things to me. Finally, once I started to have more opportunities to get into the Disney community, the more Imagineers I met and the more, I guess, the more projects I had done. Once Nostalgia hit the air, Disney kind of became aware of it, and it got a little easier for us to talk to people that actually had worked on the Haunted Mansion and worked for Disney, and so then I could get some more kind of firsthand memories, which in some cases is good, in other cases can be confusing, but at least I had, kind of a better range of information from history and written sources and memories and people that actually worked on it. And once I had all those pieces, then I thought, now I really have the full kind of everything I need to put this into a book form. And so that's when I started writing the book.
Perfect. Well, that leads excellently into my next question, which is about your writing process. So you have all that research. What's that like for you? And you're welcome to talk about what you have upcoming as well, since it sounds like you're in the middle of another writing process.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's so different this time. And that's kind of what I was kind of hinting at, is I would never consider myself a writer. So I put together a book. I'm going to put together another one. Mostly I just try to figure out what are the questions I want to answer, and I write about, or the books I'm putting together are about things that I know there's an audience for just by my participation in Disney fandom. So I feel like I'm just trying to answer the questions that I might have. So with Doombuggies, I had written a number of magazine articles over the years. I had probably a dozen different small articles and different things about this aspect of the Haunted Mansion and that aspect of the Haunted Mansion. And I started by just kind of gluing those together and editing them to sound like they were kind of consistent, and looking at it and thinking, well, here's kind of the story. And I kind of knew I needed some kind of a string to go through the whole thing. And I was fortunate enough to have a somewhat relationship with an Imagineer named Rolly Crump, who has been he was part of the team that worked on the Haunted Mansion, and he was willing to sit with me for an afternoon and just talk all about the Haunted Mansion. So I interviewed him for a few hours and kind of got a story that I kind of knew. He didn't really tell me things that I hadn't already heard, but I was at least able to kind of, in his words, form kind of a narrative thread for some of the book that I didn't really have before. So that was a big part of my process. So I guess overall what I'm saying is writing the Haunted Mansion book was more or less just gathering information that I already had and editing it to sound, have a single voice and putting it together and that type of thing. Right now I'm working on a book about another popular theme park attraction around the same era of the Haunted Mansion. And I have a different situation altogether because for a long time my publisher's been asking for this book for quite a while, and I've been kind of hemming and hawing because I thought, well, I really covered more than the Haunted Mansion in the Haunted Mansion book. I really believed that I covered a lot of what was happening at Wet Enterprises during that period of time. And then I thought, well, I'm not sure that I have another big story about Wet Enterprises to tell regarding a different attraction that they were working on at a similar within the same time as the Haunted Mansion. So my process this time is much different. And I've just started. I've written about a chapter and I'm looking at it and thinking it over and trying to figure out if it's going to be something I continue the process is a lot different because I don't have years of research already. I'm realizing how much research I'm going to have to do. On the other hand, I have a much better overall grip of the story than I had when I started the Haunted Mansion book. When I did that, I was kind of still had a lot of questions about, did this really happen this way? Who am I going to ask and where am I going to get the answers to some of these questions I have? And I don't really have so many of those kind of doubts this time. It's more just, boy, how am I going to tell this story in my own words with my own angle and answer my own questions that haven't been answered, 10 or 20 or 50 times before. So the process, it's different this time. It's much more research and much more it probably less relying on people's memories and stories and more on trying to piece things together, like a dot to dot of facts. I don't really know. It's hard for me to express things in writerly ways because I don't, like I said, consider myself a writer, but I do kind of feel like I have a good grip on how the story is going to go for the next book. So if I can find a way to put all the pieces together, then I think it's going to be a pretty good book.
That's awesome. And, you don't consider yourself a writer, but your publishers do. You've written a book. You're on to your second. We consider you a writer because we really enjoyed the book. I thought it was very well written, very easy to follow your train of thought. But we want to move into the publishing process. So enough people believed in this book that it was going to do well. How did you get there? How did you get your publisher? What was it like going through that publishing process?
Wow. Well, so I published with Theme Park Press, which is a pretty, these days, a pretty big publisher of these kind of niche Disney history books. And I know Jim Korkis has a lot of books published at Theme Park Press. Even Didier Guez has his Walt's People books published by Theme Park Press. And plus a lot of other titles that are fiction and then just kind of Disney sort of oriented. But he just covers the gamut, right? Yeah. At the time, there were many fewer books on Theme Park Press when I approached him. And, I really didn't have a lot of fear that I wouldn't be able to publish this book. I kind of always knew I have enough information for a book for sure. And there's an audience to buy it for sure. So I somehow, I kind of knew I would find some niche press that would publish it, whether it would be a university or, then I started seeing DDA's books on Theme Park Press, and I thought, I got to approach this guy first. And it really was there wasn't much of a negotiation phase or anything. He just pretty much, because Doombuggy's had a good, every publisher wants to find what's going to sell this book.
You had a built-in fan base.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I had a built-in audience. Yeah, so he that wasn't a really hard sell for him. He wanted to see a chapter to make sure I knew what I was doing. So, but it was not hard. That part of it, I was fortunate, because I had this built-in, like you say, built-in audience, and that's, most publishers are going to look pretty, they're going to be pretty happy about that being the case. So, and that was how it was for me. And the book sold really well. I was lucky enough to get a couple Amazon orange flags once in a while, up and down for the first couple months. That was exciting. And so he's, pretty much wanted me to write a follow-up the next year to kind of, because he's a bookseller, he knows like the best way to keep momentum going. But I'm, like I said, the author that doesn't think he's an author. So I just said, well, I don't, so it's been, I don't know, 5 years, I guess, since I published that book. And I finally decided, well, let's give this a shot. So I'm not, in it for, well, this is almost embarrassing to say, not in it for the money, because no niche publication author is usually in it for the money. But at the same time, I really wanted to focus on nostalgia, because that was something that 3 other people and I were doing together, and we're a team, and I wanted to be as committed as everyone else. And I think now, I've been telling them for a while. I think for the past 2 years, my resolution, we all make resolutions on the show at the end of the year. And I think for the past 2 years, it's been to start working on my next book. So
2020 is your year.
Yeah, it's my year, right? So, I the publishing part of it came fairly easy. Now, I don't know if this book, the next one that I'm working on, is going to be what the publisher wants or not. It hasn't quite totally unraveled itself in front of me yet that I know exactly where I'm going to go with it. So I probably will approach Theme Park Press first. I mean, who knows, but I imagine I will. So that's my kind of plan at the moment. But it's all very kind of new, right? I'm still kind of trying to get my head around this new book. But I'm trying to think if I have any great stories about the publishing process that I can remember. I mean, I remember getting excited when I got the contract in the mail. I mean, who doesn't get excited about that?
Yeah, it's official.
Yeah, like, oh, it's going to be a book. And I remember getting excited when I saw the number 1 top seller flag on my book a couple times. I mean, that was pretty exciting.
That is really only cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was only for, Amazon works like minute by minute practically, so, or hour by hour, right? So it would be there for a day or a day and a half, and then it would disappear. And then it came up a couple times. I'd get enough to get it back up there. So that was exciting. It's just, I don't know a lot about the publishing process. I do know, after looking back over time at doing a little bit of research, that I was, with this book, much more successful than most authors are, even they get published by major publishers, which is kind of exciting to know. And, I've sold a ton of books, and that's exciting. And I'm just glad that, mostly people seem to really like it. So those, it's all very encouraging to me. And like I said earlier on, I just like to, what I really like to do doesn't have to do with podcasting or books or websites. It has to do with kind of gathering information in an interesting way and pushing it out into the world to people. And so that the writing a book really fulfills that kind of passion that I have.
So I wanted to also ask about the cover. You said you are a graphic designer by trade. Did you have a hand in the cover?
Yeah, I did.
That's awesome.
So there's 2 covers to this book. There's I think you said there's 2 editions. I think there's actually 3.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Theme Park Press is willing to put out editions because it's easy on print on demand. They are a print on demand mostly company. So I mean, he will stock books and send them to bookstores and things, but mostly their business model is print on demand. So it's easy to make new editions, right? So we've had one kind of sort of big edition change when we changed the covers, and then the 50th anniversary edition. And I designed both of the covers. The first one had a picture of Madame Leota on the cover, kind of stylized, and then the new one has kind of a plaque and a raven on the cover. They're both things that are relative to the Haunted Mansion, but I designed them to be obviously not infringing.
Yes.
So, yeah. But yeah, I was happy to do that.
My dad has the Madame Leota copy, and I have the newer copy, since I figured I read the Madame Leota one just for personal reading a few years ago, but I saw that this was a revised and expanded edition, so I figured time to revisit it. But I would love to know what it was like for you to revisit the first book, since you did make some updates along the way.
Yeah, sure. Well, and I kind of wish, and like I said, you can just keep updating these books forever, minute by minute, the way that print on demand works. But you don't really want to do that because that's weird. So, but I always feel that way, right? So I'll tell the publisher, hey, I have, what do you think about if we have some revisions? And he usually waits for there to be, 4,000 or 5,000 new words, and then we'll call it a new edition. So there's an element of being able to fix mistakes, although I haven't had a ton of mistakes pointed out to me. There's a couple typos and things, but I haven't really had factual information that was wrong, which I'm glad about, because I really sweated over a few bits of it that I kind of interpreted the best I could. And fortunately, it's mostly, borne out in the history. It's mostly just there's no end to the Haunted Mansion's fandom grows and grows and grows. And as it grows, the Disney company kind of starts to release a little bit more information here and there. And then when they do that, then Disney fans kind of look at that and start interpolating like, well, what does that mean? And how nerdy can we get about seeing what's really behind all of this? And so, every year I learn something new. Either a cast member will say, hey, I worked there, and did you know this happened? And or an Imagineer will say, hey, I remember, working on the wood grain, or something like that. And then I'll get an extra little memory or a little picture that's a little more clear. And I don't think the 50th anniversary update, I went into some really cool information that I kind of discovered while I was researching the Haunted Mansion. That's just kind of what I call a rhyme through history. It's not really necessarily factual information about the Haunted Mansion, but it's a really interesting story. So there was a couple kind of dramatic type of developments that went into that edition. But for the most part, the new editions aren't really that much more complete. The story stays pretty much the same. I just am putting in factual information and a little historical data and rounding it out a little bit more or less. So I don't usually, people will often ask me, should I buy the new one? And then I just tell them, well,
yes,
it's kind of up to you.
Always.
Why not? But it's usually it just involves about 5,000 more words of historical information to give it a little fuller picture. Oh.
So let's jump into the book. Let's talk about some of the content and the great stories you included. The first half of your book is the history of the Haunted Mansion. So what do you think is something readers will be most surprised to learn? So without us going into the whole history of the Haunted Mansion, what's like something you think is going to stand out?
Yeah, well, I think people love the Haunted Mansion so much now. They, a lot of people think it's perfect. The perfect blend of silly and spooky and, atmosphere and character. And I think until you become kind of a Haunted Mansion nerd, I think what's surprising is that really the people that made it probably didn't totally ever feel like any one of them really had what they envisioned as the Haunted Mansion come to be. So I think a lot of them, they could look back later in their life and say, yeah, we did something pretty cool. But I think when they made it and put it together, it was a big matter of compromise. And I don't know that anyone really was thoroughly thrilled with how it came out at the time. Of course, the public was waiting for this with bated breath because they'd been teased by this building at Disneyland for 6 years. And so it was an instant success and smash hit. And I think it kind of helped everyone relax a little bit and look back a little bit more fondly on what they'd done. But it was really kind of a contentious history to some degree or another. And I think some people are surprised by that when it seems today to be such a great melding of different ideas. At the time, it was more of a compromise. That's probably the biggest general thing that I think most people find to be surprising or interesting.
Yeah, I know Emily and I each learned a lot from it as well. I feel like I had grown up enjoying the attraction and had read like the Jason Sorrell book as well, but there was even new information in here.
Yeah, for me, Ken Anderson, I had never known of his role whatsoever. I mostly have always heard of Existencio and Grim Getting Ghosts and Raleigh Crumb. And so that was a whole new realm for me, was going back even further to the origins of the Haunted Mansion. I was ignorant to all of that. So I learned a lot in those first couple chapters.
I particularly enjoyed the chapter, the too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, with all of those different Imagineers. Some, as Emily said, that we're more familiar with and some that aren't. And that chapter discusses kind of the issues of the Haunted Mansion story that have been debated and the butting heads there. So you referenced that there's many different storylines throughout, even some that didn't make it. But which Imagineer's story do you think comes through most in the current rendition of the Haunted Mansion?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, that's... Well, I think probably in the current the version of the Haunted Mansion that exists, which is pretty much, other than some new special effects and the attic changes a lot, but apart from that, it's pretty much the same as it was when it opened. And I think you kind of have to say the story got kind of abandoned in the process. And Existencio wrote the script we have, so you can say it's his story. He kind of tied things together. I would say Mark Davis's vision probably was the most influential in terms of the gags and the story elements that you see when you go through the attraction. But they started with really intense story. Like Ken Anderson, who you talked about a moment ago, in the late 50s, he sat down and came up with an actual story, like a Once Upon a Time and the End story to the Haunted Mansion, and all the way through its history up until the 60s, when they finally kind of started to settle on, well, we're going to do this and this, like with Mark Davis and Claude Coates. I think mostly they started to get rid of this part of the story and that part of the story, until now there's just hints at what was a story, and it's more experiential things to just notice happening around you. And that's kind of what we're left with. And I think people kind of like that about the Haunted Mansion, that you don't have to kind of figure out why anything, since there's not really a story that you can follow so obviously, you're not left with a lot of questions of why this and why that. You just kind of notice things and think they're amazing, and then it's over. And I guess I would say a combination of Existencio kind of tying things together, and primarily Mark Davis trying to get as much kind of lighthearted stuff in there as he could. Those two things probably make up what we see today as the Haunted Mansion. So that's where we are today, right? With Mark Davis and Existencio's storyline. I think, and Mark Davis himself, and this is what I was saying, like Disney keeps even giving us little hints of, like, there's never going to be an end to learning about the Haunted Mansion. Just this year, or this year at the D23 Expo, they released a script, a different script of the Haunted Mansion that no one had seen before. And so it kind of was an in-between script from this intense story that Ken Anderson wrote to this kind of quick hits thing that Existencio had put together. It was kind of an in-between script, and it had different elements to it and different wording. And there's really an evolution to this story. It's almost a de-evolution, or a dissolving from this intensity of a story to how can we just give people kind of an experience of atmosphere and sight gags, and not necessarily need to tell a story. Mark Davis, I don't think, was as keen on the idea of an attraction having this full developed telling a story as some of the Imagineers were. And it's interesting because he was probably the most successful Imagineer at telling a story in one little scene. And I think that's what he kind of thought theme park rides were best at, kind of giving you a quick hit of something really funny or something really amazing or really interesting to look at, and then moving you along. And so he put a lot of that into the Haunted Mansion, and his gags read really well. Well, we're going to have two people, duelers, and then there'll be portraits of them, and they'll turn and actually have a duel. Like, it's a funny gag, and he could just come up with these ideas. The very first versions of the Haunted Mansion or the Haunted House that Ken Anderson was working on, he was really telling the story of pirates. And it was going to be situated next to the Pirates Wax Museum. You know, you could walk through the Pirate Museum and then you could walk through the Ghost House. And they were both pirate attractions. And the Wax Museum was more a display of pirates from history, and you would see some of their antics and some of the things they did. And then you could walk into one of their homes, Captain Gorlio. You could walk into his home and you could kind of see what happened in his story, and it was a story of murder and deception and horrible haunting things.
I don't know if I could see that in a Disney park.
I know, it's interesting, right? And so but I mean, even in the Haunted Mansion as it exists now, they still kept a suicide in there. I mean, a blatant, obvious suicide, right? So it's interesting how you can present something and twist it so that it's, acceptable for people. That's a whole nother thing, though, right? But so the earliest versions of Haunted Mansion go back to this kind of New Orleans Square piracy thing. And then Ken Anderson, that's where they started. And then he quickly took that and said, well, why don't we make it more of just a ghost house? And then they changed the story a little bit, and the story kept changing. And that's where we get the bride came into his story. There was going to always be kind of a doomed wedding of some sort. Sometimes it was comical. Sometimes it was like with the pirate, it was going to be more of a murder. But somehow there was always going to be a bride. And so all those kind of elements that now are in the Haunted Mansion just kind of seemingly randomly, they come from somewhere in the past. They just have been kind of disassociated from each other.
I think it also works because, like you mentioned in your book, many times Walt Disney himself marketed the Haunted Mansion as a home for ghosts, and they're traveling around the world to collect and invite the best ghosts in the world to come live there. So I think it's supposed to feel, I think Walt himself, even though he might have been searching for a story, they set it up so well to be such a hodgepodge because it's just a living space of all these different ghosts with all different stories together in one house. So I think that works well, like you said, with those snapshots of just moving scene to scene, and it doesn't have to fit because Walt, I think, already set it up in our minds from that early marketing that it's just a whole bunch of ghosts and hosts, I guess, together. So what we want to know from you is, what is your favorite scene? So as you're moving through this, kaleidoscope of different scenes and meeting all of our different ghost friends, which is your favorite?
That changes often, although it's hard not to love the ballroom scene because it's the most visually spectacular. And
that's my favorite.
Yeah. And everyone talks about Pepper's Ghost. Pepper's Ghost is so famous because of the Haunted Mansion. And this is really the main instance of Pepper's Ghost in the Haunted Mansion is this one big giant scene in the ballroom. It's hard. I don't know that's my favorite story situation. I might well, they just put the Hatbox Ghost back in the attic, and yes. I really like that. That's amazing, too.
It's so good.
Isn't that great?
I've never seen it.
You'll get there, Emily.
I will get there.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother story, right? Bringing back the haunted Hatbox Ghost. So, it's kind of a time. I mean, I'll say the ballroom because it's just so visually spectacular and amazing, and people still to this day can't figure out. People just say, "Oh, it's a hologram," as if people even said that in the early 70s when the idea of holograms first became known to people. They were claiming it was a hologram, and obviously Disneyland wasn't going to have full scale holograms in the 1969 in this ballroom, but people just didn't know. They just didn't know, how do you make something you can see right through, and so that's probably my favorite scene.
I think my favorite scene at Walt Disney World is Madame Leota, but at Disneyland, it's definitely the Hatbox Ghost in the attic, like that as a cohesive unit. And the Hatbox Ghost, even before he materialized in the mansion, had been featured on a lot of merchandise. So I particularly enjoyed the final chapter, Needful Things, that talks about the collectibles available to mansion fans. Do you have an item in your personal collection that you're most proud of?
Oh, boy. I don't know.
I imagine it's a big collection.
I do have a collection of Haunted Mansion things. I am a collector. I probably should have mentioned that early on. That's one of the biggest parts of my Disney fandom. It kind of goes hand in hand with the presenting information. I'm a collector of almost anything. And Haunted Mansion is one of my collections. And, I have a lot of the Kevin and Jody. So Kevin and Jody are designers that worked for Disney for many years, designing some of their most popular collectibles, and especially in the 90s and 2000s, or the 2000s, I guess. And so I have a few of their Haunted Mansion things. The Hatbox Ghost Big Fig they created is incredible, and I have one of those. I think my favorite thing, though, is I was able to get one of the recording scripts from that Haunted Mansion record album that I was talking about earlier. Yeah, and it was on, I think, eBay. I don't remember, but I bid really high because I just wanted to make sure that I got it. And I like to hold things that are actual history, right? And so that was a big thing. And then I finally met Pete Renaday, who was the voice of the Ghost Host on that record. I've since been able to meet him, or actually we're now, I would say, friends. But at the first time I met him, I was just kind of shaky and in awe, because people think of Paul Frees as the Ghost Host because he is the amazing voice of Disneyland and the Ghost Host and many other voices for Disneyland. But my Ghost Host was Pete Renaday, because I listened to that record almost literally every day when I was a child. And so I got to meet him, and he signed it for me, is I guess the point I'm going to make. He signed my copy of the recording script. So that's probably the thing I most cherish from the Haunted Mansion, but I do have a lot of stuff.
That's really cool. That's special and one of a kind.
Yeah, it is.
So your book concludes with an appendix for the Nightmare Before Christmas overlay. So I have two questions for you. Was this an edition for the 50th anniversary copy?
Yes. Yeah, I think so, or at least one of the new editions. But it was I think it was this latest edition.
Yeah, I don't think it was in the one that I read first, but then it's my dad's copy, so I wasn't going to make him track it down for me.
Again, my naivety of Disneyland, I had to check the timelines here. I don't know how long has that overlay been used?
Oh, it's more than a decade. I think 2001
really?
was when it opened, I believe.
Oh, wow.
That's almost 2 decades. And that
yeah,
just
almost
made
2
me
decades.
Feel...
Oh, my gosh. And see, here I am. I'm like, oh, it seems so new. Maybe just because, the invention of social media and whatever, that us East Coasters are now learning so much more about Disneyland, that I thought it was a lot newer than that. Wow.
Yeah, no, it's been around for a long, long time. Yeah, I think 2001, because if I'm not mistaken, they had a big special event planned for the grand opening, and then we had 9/11, which was tragic, and they had to kind of quickly decide, well, what are we going to do? And I think they still hosted it, but kind of, I think I'm remembering this story right. I hope I am. I'm pretty sure that's the Haunted Mansion, the Haunted Mansion holiday. But yeah, it's been quite a while.
And so my second question is, what do you think about overlays on a classic attraction such as the Haunted Mansion? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it risks the integrity? What's your interpretation?
Okay, so overlays I think are a great thing, because then you don't take out something to put something else in. You just are kind of, temporarily adjusting something. So I'm a big fan of overlays, and plus they're usually quite amazingly transformative. If you go in the Small World holiday at Disneyland, everything from the facade, which Disneyland's facade of Small World is this incredible light show and this amazing place to be, and then it carries right through seamlessly into all these brand new sparkling bells and lights and Christmas. It's just amazing, even though it's really just redressing. So the Haunted Mansion is a little different than that. They totally changed the story, and everything about it is different. And I could get nitpicky about how long the overlay is on for Nightmare Before Christmas. It's really almost more than a quarter of the operating season of the Haunted Mansion is taken up by Nightmare. I think almost a third of the operating season. I'm not positive about that, but I'm pretty sure it's more than a quarter.
Because it takes time to set up too.
Yeah, because it's quite a few weeks of setting up and taking down. So, I might wish that it could be. I kind of wish they had another overlay for Halloween and they made it even spookier, so that they'd have the spooky.
Oh, that'd be cool.
I know, wouldn't that be amazing? There's just sadly not enough time in between that and Christmas to switch, right? But I don't. Maybe there is, or maybe not. But I might wish at least it could be a normal haunted house for Halloween. But in general, I love the Haunted Mansion holiday. I don't know that I prefer it, but I love that it's its own thing, and then the Haunted Mansion comes back sooner or later. And so we have two different experiences we can enjoy at Disneyland in one place, right? So I'm all for that.
I finally got to experience the Nightmare Before Christmas overlay last October, not this most recent one, but we were out there last year for Halloween, and I was like, this is almost a totally different attraction. You're like, okay, I know some scenes feel very familiar, like the ballroom and the seance, but other parts I'm like, where are we? Like, what did they add here?
Yeah, it's definitely very, very different. It's much more light. The whole place is, you can see, if you look at the ceilings, you can see them all pretty clearly everywhere, which is not how it is with the regular Haunted Mansion. It's pretty dark usually. So, all the new effects and lights and things, they make it more festive and a little less spooky and a little more, I don't know. It is very Nightmare Before Christmassy. So if you're a fan of that, you're going to love the Haunted Mansion Holiday. And I am a fan of that. So that's probably also a part of why it doesn't bother me. I really love Nightmare Before Christmas. So why wouldn't I want it in the Haunted Mansion?
Of course.
Two great tastes that taste great together, right? So, and some people are not big fans at all. I mean, some people hate that it's in there and takes up space and takes away the Haunted Mansion's regular operating version. I'm not one of those people, but I get it. I understand. But yeah, I'm a fan.
I get torn because I haven't been to Disneyland, but if I were to plan my first trip, I also really enjoy Nightmare Before Christmas. So part of me really wants to see the overlay, but do I want to experience that first or the original Nightmare Before Christmas first? And the original Haunted Mansion first. And so I get really torn about how I want to plan my first Disneyland trip.
Yeah, well, you maybe won't have a choice because it's so long in the Haunted Mansion. I mean, but yeah, I mean, if I were you, I would see the original first, but that's just me.
Straight from the source.
It's definitely fun to experience this stuff in new ways, and so your book primarily focuses on the two domestic mansions located in Disneyland and Walt Disney World. I'm curious, have you visited the international parks, and would you consider writing about those renditions of the mansion?
I have not, so I would consider it, although I don't feel like how do I say this? So I don't anticipate ever being surprised by Phantom Manor when I get to see it someday. I mean, I have talked to people that helped design it, that work on it, that have been on it many times. I've seen pictures of, every little place behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. So that's, in a sense, I kind of feel like I could do a chapter on the Phantom Manor, but I just feel like I really shouldn't do that until I have actually been there in person to see it. So yeah, I could someday add those chapters to the book, but I just, as an author, feel like I should have firsthand experience before I start writing about things, even though I don't really anticipate being truly surprised by anything.
Would you consider Mystic Manor part of it? I know that's kind of like a gray area.
No, for me, it's not gray at all. No, that's nothing to do with the Haunted Mansion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know Disney put it in Jason Surell's new book, and
they spin it.
He may or may not really believe that's Haunted Mansion. It's not anything to do with the Haunted
Mansion. The story is completely different. It's just it's
and
a mansion, and there's
I put it. I put a page about it on the new Doombuggies because I felt like, well, it's in Jason's book, so I better at least have somewhere to express my views of why this is not a Haunted Mansion. But I did. I mean, it's not. Phantom Manor is obviously the Haunted Mansion.
Yes.
I mean, Phantom Manor means Haunted Mansion
macabre.
In a different language. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's the same layout. Everything's the same.
But different.
Mystic Manor, but different. You're right, but so different, right? But the Mystic Manor is just different and different. There's no same. There's
I like that.
Even the kind of call outs to the Haunted Mansion are vague at the best. So, no, I'm not. So someone might argue with me, and I'm glad to have an argument about it. But
I'll definitely have to check that page out. It sounds like a good read.
Yeah, but I'm pretty adamant about it not really having anything to do with the Haunted Mansion.
As a holistic wrap-up of our discussion here, why do you think the Haunted Mansion, an attraction developed from the early 1950s, over 50 years later, still holds up today?
Well, you've asked the question that has kind of become my life goal to answer, which, spoiler alert, there is no answer. But I will say, you know, it really, well, one obvious thing is that it just covers a bunch of territory. I mean, there's so many genres that it hits on that there's fans of a lot of things, you know, magicians and actors and theme park fans and Disney fans and Halloween fans and horror movie fans. Like everyone can find a little something in there that kind of rings their bell a little bit. So, I mean, it is one attraction that has a kind of a wide span of genres that it touches. And I mean, there's probably also some truth to the fact that it's a dark ride that deals with existential things, you know, to some degree or another, and maybe in a general wide kind of big picture way it maybe appeals to people in a sense just because of that. I think probably, well, like I said, I don't have the answer to that, and I do keep asking because this is a question everyone wants to know from the Doombuggies guy. You must know why people like this ride because you have the website about it and you talk to people, and it's like the more fans I meet, the more confusing it gets because I'll always discover some new version of fan that I had known existed before, and then I'll think, oh, okay, this is. I mean, there are some pretty broad. You know, for a while there in the 90s, the Gothic subculture was a big proponent of Haunted Mansion fandom, and we had Bats Day and that kind of thing going on at Disneyland. That kind of was a big thing. There's always been the Imagineering super fans. The Disney history people have always kind of been big fans because it encompasses a lot of Imagineering history. And then the Monster Kids have always loved it because they're the ones that were actually waiting for the Haunted Mansion to open, and there's quite a few of that generation still talking to me about, you know, man, I remember waiting for that thing to open for years. So that's a big part of it too. But this new generation of Haunted Mansion fans, it's really interesting. I haven't been able to put my finger on the pulse yet. And I don't know that there really will be an easy way to answer that question. I mean, Disneyland clearly thinks there's no bottom. You can see them just pouring merchandise out, you know, literally flooding the market with it. And, you know, on Mousetalgia, we've been talking about, like, when are they going to jump the shark with the Haunted Mansion stuff? You know, don't do this to us. But it just doesn't seem like they can. It's a lifestyle at the moment that Disney has kind of recognized and jumped into. So, yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you.
No, I think that was great to sum up from your experiences. They're really, it's different for every person, I guess, is the takeaway there.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it really is.
Well, I know you don't consider yourself an author, but we always like to ask our guests if they have any advice for aspiring Disney authors.
Sure. I mean, I can give you the advice from my own perspective. I would say, well, at least from my perspective, it was never, if the book can come first. Like, I want to write a book, so I'm going to work on it. That can come first. I think that's always going to be harder than, like, wow, I have so much it should be in a book, right? There's these two different, it seems to me from the few authors I've talked to, it's either, I mean, until you become a professional author and just are writing books regularly, then of course, you know, we're going to put a book together and you know the drill. But before that, if you're just trying to dive into writing a Disney book, boy, I feel like write about something you really, really know about, because if you're a first-time writer, there's so much to kind of keep in mind about the practical parts of writing that if you're trying to also balance that with doing heavy research, that could get, at least for me, that could have been daunting. So I was fortunate that I had a lot of my research done. I just had to kind of piece it all together and make a good narrative out of it. So that's kind of the best thing I could say is try to, if you're going at it from not really having a subject, but you just want to write a book, boy, that's going to be a hard row to hoe, I think. But if you have at least know something you really love and want people to know, if there's something you really want to tell everyone around you, maybe that's a good place to start with your first book.
That's really good advice. I know Courtney and I have talked on past shows that we are aspiring authors maybe someday, and, you know, always coming up with the topic, and that's always the tough part. So our final question that we always ask every author, we love to leave our listeners with additional resources to add to their library. So what is your favorite Disney book If you had to recommend a book to someone to read.
Wow. Well, this is recency bias, but it will be hard for this to ever be topped. So the new book by Chris Merritt and Pete Docter, Mark Davis, In His Own Words, I believe it's called. I don't even remember. It's kind of a longish title, but it's a 2-book set. It sells for about $100 on Amazon. It's the most incredible Disney history book I believe has ever been published. It's they dug up just completely never before seen things from Mark Davis. Mark Davis was responsible for a lot of modern Disneyland, what most people that started going in the 70s and 80s remember, all the Mark Davis stuff. And it's just an incredible telling, because it uses mostly his own words and then a lot of quotes from people talking about Mark Davis, but it's largely his own words about what he was working on and what he did, along with just copious amounts of illustrations. So that's got to be the go-to Disney history book in my library right now.
I think it's definitely on our list for 2020. We just have to keep an eye on the Amazon prices if they drop, because I've heard great things about it.
I think it's on a lot of people's Christmas lists this year.
Mine included.
Same.
But as we said at the top of the episode, this will be our final episode for 2019. Be sure to stay tuned to our social channels to see what's up next on our reading list. If you're just joining us for the first time, we often end our episodes kind of with a preview of what our next book is if you want to read along. But we're going to take some time for personal reading, go through the holidays, and we'll be back in early 2020 with something new. In the meantime, you can follow Book of the Mouse Club on Twitter and Instagram at Book of the Mouse, or email us with comments or ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. You can follow me, Courtney, on Instagram at GreatGuthsby, or on Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
And you can find me, Emily, on Instagram and Twitter at the same handle at Emily_McD.
And Jeff, where's the best way for our listeners to stay in touch with you?
Oh, well, you can find Doombuggies on Facebook, or facebook.com/Doombuggies, or instagram.com/Doombuggies, or Twitter. We're at Doombuggies on Twitter. And any of those ways is a good way to figure out what's going on, what's the latest with me. You can also keep an eye on, if you like Disney history, every Monday you can hear me prattle on about Disney history on the Mousetalgia podcast. And that's you can find us at www.mousetalgia.com, or you can just look us up on your podcast apps. And those are the best ways to get a hold of me.
Perfect. Well, we always like to end each episode with a quote, and we let our author guests do the honor. So do you have a quote prepared for us?
Sure. Let's see. I am going to quote from the Imagineer Rolly Crump, who I mentioned that I had spoken to for extensively about this book. I interviewed him. And I'm actually going to quote from his brief foreword that he wrote for my book. So, and this kind of is kind of the genesis of this whole thing. He said, this whole book, he said, even though I worked on the development of the Haunted Mansion along with the other Imagineers, at the time we were all working independently of each other, and we really didn't share what we were doing with each other. Somehow it all came together, but we'll never know what might have been if Walt had lived to see the mansion completed.
Oh, I wish he had, but that's so great that you've kind of carried on that legacy with Raleigh and others within your own book.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us today. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks again, Jeff. This was great. Bye, listeners.
Hurry back. Be sure to bring your death certificate. Hurry back. If you decide to join us. Be sure to bring your death certificate. If you decide to join us.
Book of the Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.